Hey everybody, it's Uncle Grumpy and welcome to Grumpy Tonight. As you can see, tonight we've got Dr. Lawrence Pasternack and Jed Green with us here tonight. As you can see, hang on, I've got one too many sounds coming out of my computer here. There we go. All right, well tonight we're going to take a look at the new petition that Orca has rolled out. Jed Green is the head of Orca. He's spearheading this whole thing. Dr. Pasternack and myself have been helping with a lot of the patient protections, as well as Lawrence has been doing a lot of the layout. So before we get started, I want to give you guys a few minutes to say something. Jed, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Hey, Grumpy, great to be here. Thanks for having me on. Lawrence, good to see you. Yeah, what I just would want to say real quick is that ORCA stands for Oklahomans for Responsible Cannabis Action. It's real simple. It's a 501c4 nonprofit advocacy group, and that right now is basically the vehicle by which we are getting to work on a couple of initiative petitions. Been working with a lot of folks in the community, a lot of folks that have a lot to say about these issues, a lot of the folks at the Capitol. For folks that don't know me, as I'm not someone that is out and around a lot, I do campaign work in one aspect, and I've been doing it here in Oklahoma for about 15 years. If you want to look me up, you can Google Jed Green, SQ788, and there will be a list of entertaining tales that you will see of some of what the work that I did was during the time. At the end of the day, what I really did for 788, I didn't collect signatures. I'm not one of the immortals, but I'm the guy that came in and helped bridge the gap between industry and community, and put together a cohesive professional campaign, and I think that helped us a little bit. So we've known a lot that there would possibly be a need for petitions to make lifts that our legislature is not able to. That's been discussed. That now is a good time to do it. We see a lot of things going on, a lot of things not going on. So that's what the effort is. I'm putting it together as an offering where, as with the spirit of 788, we're starting this in the community. There have been a number of us that have kind of worked together to get some basic consensus, to get a draft together, and then get it out to the rest of the community here for 3-4 weeks, about 30 days. And if at the end of July, we seem to have language that everyone can get behind, that community and business can get behind, then we'll run it, and we'll see what we can do to get it on the ballot and see what we can do to get it passed. So with that, again, Grumpy, thank you so much for having me on. It's the number one thing that we have to accomplish to be successful are folks in the community coming together to, review, contribute, and then decide if they want to support the end product. So this is a fantastic part of that. Thank you.
I always like to get this plug in there. We have to get grumpy again. We all had to get grumpy to get here to begin with. And that's government refusal united many people to say yes. So when we all get grumpy again, like we are now, then we'll be able to do great things. So Lawrence, you want to go ahead and add something here?
Sure. I think that a year and a half ago, when 806, 807 came out, that part of it was just not the right time. And Chris and I had, basically, we didn't author it. We were sent a draft. We were asked to offer some comments on a draft. We wanted to go over the petitions with the public, and we felt that new approach was going to move forward. And there were some good things and bad things, and we wanted to work through it all. But timing was an issue. That people back a year and a half ago, there was such a celebration of the amazing victory of 788 that people were still sort of in the swoon of. And we we hadn't yet started to get a full grasp of all the problems that we were going to face with the legislature and the problems we were going to face with the regulatory agency. So we were, in a sense, in the kind of the honeymoon period a year and a half ago. But things are different now. We've seen so many problems at the regulatory level and problems in terms of what seems to basically just be a stalemate between the House and the Senate. And so, one of the things that people said a year and a half ago was, there are fixes to the medical program that are needed. Why go on to full access until we fix those medical things? And some of those medical things might only be fixed through full access. But at the same time, I absolutely concur that there are issues within the medical program that needs to be fixed. So there's many advantages to the approach that we're looking at this time, which is to have two separate petitions, have a constitutional medical petition that will, as people have said is needed, fix a number of the medical issues, and also full access. So why do we need full access? If we are in a state where anybody can get a patient card, why do we have to bother with a full access program? Well, one thing is that 19 other states now have full access, and it'll probably be 21 or 22 by the end of the year. And so in the sense that we want to keep up, we want to still be a leader, then there's some rationale for a full access. But another factor is not everybody gets a card for varying reasons. They don't want to get on a government list. They don't have the money right then. They might just be trying it and don't feel ready to get a card. But the consequence is that over 20,000 people have been arrested for cannabis possession, charged with a misdemeanor for cannabis possession since 788 passed. And so if one of the key reasons for legalization, key reasons behind 788 is to make sure that nobody gets into legal trouble for cannabis. The work isn't done yet. Nobody should ever face criminal charges for cannabis. And right now, people are still being charged with misdemeanors, which could undermine their chances of getting jobs, getting housing, getting loans, and all that has to come to an end. So the upside of the full access petition, and the way it's basically being set up, is that the two petitions are identical, except one says you need a card, the other one says anyone 21 and older. So basically, with a difference in taxes, and with that, there's really no other substantial differences between the two petitions. But what it'll mean is that nobody will have to go to jail. Nobody will risk any criminal charges for cannabis possession, which they still risk. And like I said, 20,000 people since 788, 4,000 to 6,000 people a year are still being charged with cannabis possession. And we need to find a way to end that.
Jed, let me ask you a question about something. And Lawrence, I want to have you show us the layout here real quick. In this petition, you have kind of you've intertwined medical marijuana and hemp, or cannabis and hemp, just put it all under one umbrella. Is that correct? Can you explain that just briefly? I mean, I don't want to get into too many of the weeds about it, but if you could explain that a little bit, people can then go and read about it. Lawrence, after that, if you'd pull up the petition and
Sure.
Let's take a harder look at the patient protections of the new petition. But first, if you could explain some of the reason behind that. It's something I'm curious about.
Sure. I do want to take one point here to address something that Lawrence mentioned, and that is the thing for everyone to understand here is that the way that these two petitions, one medical, one recreational, work together is that it sets up where recreational is an option right now. And if it's passed, then, those additional rights are granted, but it does not create a duplication in licenses. It is an extremely streamlined method of doing it. It will probably be the most streamlined in the country. I think that's, at the end of the day, the difference will be a tax rate paid at the register. The way this is setting up is that if full access passes, there will be a 15 to 20% tax rate on full access sales. That number is not set. Your commentary would help set that number over the next 30 days. What would occur is that if full access passes, at that tax rate that we determined, then the 7% excise tax on medical sales would be eliminated. We don't want to just outright eliminate 7% out of hand because our program is extremely healthy. And while I would like to see lowest cost patients medicine possible, we don't want to wreck our program, which is what we've seen in other states. And it's not just full access that can do that. It's getting ahead of ourselves. So that there's an interplay there, but the first thing to know is that full access here is no threat to medical. So, with that, please check out the doc. Grumpy, to your question directly, that is another place where we look to move ahead of other states with a real bit of common sense law. And that is that marijuana, hemp, they're all the cannabis plant. It's the same plant. You've got a lot of similar, depending on your outcomes, the cultivation techniques are the same. It's the same damn plant. And right now we're setting up for a more bloated bureaucracy by having one held in one agency, one held in another agency, all of them on top of each other, but, limited link in what that is. And so that's what we're looking to do, is to create the Cannabis Commission that would control both hemp and marijuana. Now, all of the folks that are involved in this, okay, folks on the hemp side, license holders, okay, so if you're like, okay, there's issues with that, of course there will be. If we do not set it up correctly. So what we've done is that ODAF will continue to bear responsibility and work with USDA and FSA in administering the hemp program. And so we're not doing anything super radical here. What we're doing is just pulling them in under a final umbrella. One problem that we've got with hemp is that there is not nearly the level of consumer protections on products, namely CBD, that are coming out of hemp harvest. Another thing that we're seeing, if we're going to be proactive in favor of our community, is that we're seeing this year in legislation across the nation, we're seeing knee-jerk reaction laws and regulations. I believe we just caught one here at the regulatory level that works to govern Delta 8, Delta 10, and other synthetically produced THC molecules. Well, as we're looking ahead, we see that there's some larger companies. There are a couple of there's one based out of, I believe, British Columbia. I can't remember their name. Anyway, they're filing a lot of patents on further derived products from this plant-based, so we've got a lot of new plant-based medicines coming in here. And so what we want to do is get all of that under one roof so that everyone is talking, and then, instead of, restrict the unknown, automatically have a landing pad for regulation. And as you'll see in the document, research on this, we work to push that. So it's a common sense step, basically, to get all of it under one roof. And, there are notes and exceptions for, non-consumer product hemp applications. But, there are some things that we can do here. We can also, the hemp programs don't have a lot of money. And there is a massive potential for industrial growth and doing some really cool economic development with the fiber and seed, fiber, plastics. I see that, we've got companies here in Oklahoma setting up to do plant-derived plastics. That's cool. Okay, here's volume. There's definitely some things that that we're looking that we could get tied in here. And then there are also, when you look at, last point on this in concept, Grumpy, is that when you look at when you look at how, these two programs go together, you see on the hemp side, the way that legalization has been dealt with nationally in cannabis. And one thing the way that occurred was upon legalization, the feds basically said, we defer to the state program. Now, it's wholly possible that something similar could happen with marijuana on the side, because that's an instant plug-in. We can go down the rabbit hole on that. We will over on the Orca side at some point, just chewing up every part of this. But yeah, that's a little bit of the background.
Okay, well, that one gets pretty deep, and that's one that requires some serious education. So I really want the community to be aware that it's there and to look for it. They're much smarter on most of that than I am. I do want to step back to the tax thing real quick. Lawrence and I were just talking about this, just working this out just before we went on here. And what we're thinking, what I think is a good idea anyway, is not only do we need to leave it at the 7% for full access, but because of that gap, and I understand the issue we would have with the state suddenly not making any money. We want to drop the taxes on the excise tax on the patient to 0, but we don't want it to be any more than 7 on the full access side. I understand where the cash flow problem is going to be for at least a couple of years because we have so many card holders. So what we were thinking was maybe we put in there that it stays the same for the first year, and it's 7 on the rec side, of course, also. But then after a year, then the patient taxes come down, or 2, the full cycle of cards, because maybe less people will be getting cards after there's full access. Maybe it doesn't fit in everyone's life, and so within a 2-year cycle, I would think we could kind of balance it out a little bit, plus learn what starts to come in from out of state. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's important to ease into it no matter how we go, right? There's a implementation timeline in this document. If everyone looks, you'll notice that it's a little easier implementation time frame than what we had with 788, which it was important that it was, as someone said at a working group meeting, we wanted to drop the hammer. Well, that's what happened, and there's been a big ass splatter. So we want to go ahead. We got a little easier timeline in there, but yeah.
Okay, well, there's a couple tax ideas out there. Everybody can bounce those around a little bit and let us know.
And we need more of them. And Grumpy, one thing that I'm working on in the next couple of weeks is circling around to a lot of our state leaders and see if I can some targeted folks, just to see if I can lean on some wisdom that may be there and say, hey, look, this is real. We're doing this, and we've got it out. Anyone can look at it, but we'd appreciate some input from folks that may be dealing with some of these budgetary issues and such, and just say, hey, what do you got in mind? That's the point of this exercise, is to reach out to everyone, and let's see if we can come up with the best language at the end of this.
Okay, Lawrence, once you go ahead and pull up, you've got sharing capability there. Once you pull that up, maybe scroll through it real quick.
Sure.
And I wouldn't mind taking a good look at the patient part we were working on.
Yeah.
Did you want me to pull up the constitutional medical, or did you want me to pull up the full access?
Let's look at the constitutional medical, and let's look at what we're trying to do with basically moving 788 to the Constitution to some degree. Let's look at the patient protections there and see what we want, what we think might be places to start fixes.
Sure. And by the way, my view is I would like to keep the full access at 7%. So drop the medical entirely, drop the medical to 0%, and have 7% for full access. But it's a matter of looking at what the total revenue generated would be and modeling it after that, because the more taxes, the more we're able to diversify the Oklahoma economy by way of cannabis, and the more political influence cannabis has in our state. So that's kind of the trade-off with regards to the tax rate. It'll, 200 million versus 400 million, basically in taxes, probably with a full access program at 7% versus say 14%. Okay,
Well,
so
Mike,
let me go ahead, Jed.
I was just going to say, and that's see, that's a good thing that you pointed out there. And the point really is that no one really exactly knows. There is a hell of a lot of speculation in this. And what we want to make sure that we do is not have our state go into a situation that we see a lot of businesses go in where they think, holy shit, there's this giant pot of gold over here. Let's run out here on a limb on what our expectations are that we think is going to happen, and then wind up getting into trouble, So when you look at some of the things that we do and some of the things that we fund with this before extra revenue goes on to the legislature, that's the thing that we really want to do here is remember, the budget is the plan. So exactly what that looks like, we just want to make sure that we ease into this. And if, sometime from now, we see that there's something that really needs to be, changed, we can address that at that time. But that's what scares me the most is just, speculating too far in something that is so dynamic.
Yeah. So Stephen Ross says, protect the patients. And I'd say, absolutely. That's basically what I've been spending my time on with this petition. Other people have been working on the regulatory and business stuff. I have been basically putting everything I can imagine going into patient protections, which we'll get to in a minute. I'm also putting up now in the comments the website, orcaok.com, for people to submit any feedback, any suggestions, any ideas related to this petition. So it's 20 something pages long as it is right now. And I'm not going to go through it word by word, but basically it starts off by the Oklahoma Cannabis Commission that will have regulatory authority over both hemp and marijuana. And that it has basically the same kind of licensing rules as our current program, no caps on licenses, $2,500 for the licenses. So basically it's doing everything that it can to duplicate exactly where we are with regards to 788 on the business side. One thing that it does, though, that's different than where we are right now is that it creates a lot more transparency with regards to the regulatory agency, and also a lot more industry input with regards to the formation of rules, because we're seeing basically that the rules are nearly a done deal by regulators, by bureaucrats, with very little advice from people who have real industry knowledge, and we need to change that. So the restructuring of the agency is meant to give a board of industry experts a lot more say when it comes to the structure of the regulations, as opposed to it being regulators without the proper experiences pushing them upon us. So it does all of that. A lot of sort of layers of ways in which industry experts can provide feedback through the composition of all the rules. Authorizes the agency to enter into arrangements as needed with the other agencies in the state. It then allocates taxation. And so the 7% tax on medical marijuana, notice here it'll say 1.5% of the gross collection of excise tax. So that doesn't mean 1.5% of the 7%. It rather means if the 7% generates, let's say, $100 million, then it'd be 1.5% of the $100 million. So some money goes into research, some money goes into mental health, some money goes into extension programs for agriculture. Some money goes to law enforcement to give them special training with regards to mental health, to basically help them diffuse situations, to take away the kind of criminal issues, reduce violence. And then the rest of it goes into the general fund.
Yeah, I would, there's a lot of minutia there. I really want to tell everybody to please open your eyes real wide. Let's look really deep into that and figure out the best way to do this. I'm really think we need to pay special close attention to where this money's going and how we allocate this. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a starting point, and I expect that to be a point of discussion. You see, that's one of the, again, that's the process here. You know,
Yeah.
here we have a recommended starting point. It's got a lot of foundation.
Yeah.
It's solid, but you know, let's everyone get eyes on it. Let's get to consensus on this deal.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we're really eager to get feedback on, both for the medical, but especially for the full access. If we're talking about generating 2, 3, maybe $400 million in revenue, what are your ideas for how to spend it? Who needs it? You know, special programs for the poor, mental health, job training for people getting out of jail. Give us your ideas, right?
Yeah,
This is the
something that's
money that we're
important
going to
me.
be generating, and we want to find ways to help people.
Yeah,
Right, and I want to be clear.
everybody's got something. Like for me, it's low income housing. I think we need to find a way to use some of the money for low income housing, and there's many ways to address that.
Yeah, and I think that you know what, you know, when we get practical, because obviously we can't submit a Christmas list here, but if folks will get their input in, you know, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? And so there are programs or issues, especially things that are at the municipal level, where we could potentially provide some flexibility and funds that, you know, could be used, you know, generally directed in that. So there could be a little bit of, there could be some wiggle room in there and some real funding for some of the municipalities to deal with some of this. And then, you know, when we look at the county extension dollars, you know, is there a better way to benefit rural Oklahoma? I don't know. I mean, I kind of live back and forth between both worlds, and you know, I see a lot of different perspectives. So I'd, you know, love to hear from everyone on any of that, you know.
And I'd like to see education and job training grants for people who have been adversely affected by the war on drugs, people who have, you know, faced criminal charges, people who have been in jail and it's injured their lives. I'd love to see resources allocated to those kinds of people to give them something back that was unjustly taken away from them. But let me move on.
Yeah.
You know, as I mentioned, it preserves the rate of $2,500 for business licenses. And it also preserves the residency requirement, putting the residency requirement into the Constitution, everybody, so that all businesses have to be 75% Oklahoma owned. So it rolls back, right, what the Senate did this year by extending it out to 40% to publicly traded businesses, to back down to what 788 said.
No,
all businesses have to be 75%.
That's going to be a problem. But go ahead. Go ahead.
All right.
Look, guys, and here's the thing. Okay, everyone out there on that point, there is a real short, sweet conversation to be had about interstate commerce clause, where that's at with the courts. At the end of the day, everyone knows that the residency requirement will not ultimately stand for the long haul. The question that we have as a community is exactly how do we want to make this short-term play? Can't wait to hear from everyone. We got plenty to discuss there too.
On that, I have to throw out then, since you went that far, I have to throw out that in that recent decision, the courts decided they didn't want to hear it, meaning they left it alone, meaning until the federal government does something, it looks like nobody wants to do anything. So as you just said, it'd be great to hear what everybody thinks, because we could grab this for a couple more years, or we could just let it go and set ourselves up right from the beginning. Let's see what everybody says.
Hey, I'm sorry. It's real simple. It's real simple. How much longer do we want to make out-of-state interests do extra paperwork?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all they're doing.
That's how it's going down. We all know that. So the question is, do we do that? That's where I'm like, well, I mean, I'm good with it on principle. I'll keep it at 75-25, but have a mechanism in there to whenever the feds say, oh, no, you can't do that, then it drops like that. And we're in the game. It's almost like, you know, we're holding back a floodgate on the deal. So I want to hear from everyone, you know, especially you big businesses, you know, what does everyone have to say? No one's getting persecuted here. We're going to line this out. You know, those arguments right there on residency, you know, there are arguments in here that it really does just stack up to a short stack. Let's make a decision and go with it as a community, right?
All right, Lawrence, let's move forward.
So this just goes over all the different categories of business licenses, dispensary and processor, brokers or distributors, transport, waste disposal, and so on. By the way, just so anybody who's worried, a grower or processor could sell directly to a dispensary, just like they can now. One of the things that Chip Hall encouraged that we put in there was for a physician to issue recommendations, they're going to have to get a license that shows that they have a number of hours of training in the endocannabinoid system. So that's in there right now, that they have to either through their medical degree or otherwise have 4 hours of training. And we're expanding recommenders to all medical practitioners in the state with prescriptive authority. That is, anybody who could write a prescription. That includes nurse practitioners and physician's assistants and so on.
But they'll first have to take this class.
Yeah, and there's many of them out there. You know,
Right, which is just further training.
Yeah, and let me hop in and elaborate on that point right there, since you pinged on it, Lawrence. Is that yeah, in pulling this together, I asked the folks to really focus on where they, I wanted to know from folks, what have you really been focusing on? Where do you see that we need to go? So anyway, Chip and I had some conversations about this, and he is actually in advocacy, is kind of leading the charge in poking at the medical establishment and others to see kind of exactly where what this looks like. We're getting some good information, and I think that we will see the medical recommender license. We want to keep it low cost, but we want to get some education in here. And it's not that our current recommending doctors may not already be versed. Some are, some, there's, it's getting a little loose out there, folks. So there's that. But then the other thing is this again is an opportunity to create education in general on this. This ties into research and education licenses, which we work to provide funding for programs that would make these trainings available to a broader group of people than just the folks, recommending this. We need to do education in our state on this, and we need to learn. And so this is a great way to do it.
Yeah, and just just a couple examples of why this kind of continuing medical education is needed. Eucalyptol could increase seizures. So if you're a recommending physician for a patient who has a seizure disorder, that's the kind of thing you'd probably want to be able to tell them. Myrcene, a lot of people have allergies, they may not know to myrcene. So there's just lots of things about terpenes. Oh, if you have glaucoma, then even though THC is good for glaucoma, CBD isn't. So just lots of little minutiae that the recommending practitioner ought to be able to give guidance to their patients. So there are reasons for them to have that kind of training.
If we want to make this more of a medical program, like everybody says they want to do, and we want to help fix this medical program, maybe things like this are what we have to look at.
Oh, absolutely. I was just about to make a smart ass remark about we are even working on the concerns of those that were against 788 at the time, and we are making this medical. We're wanting to, it's already kind of there, but it's got to have more push to it than what it, has had the last couple of years. There have been licenses available, but the state needs to show a commitment to it. It can't just be all on industry and community to, need to help set up. This is done for other industries. So let's really start to settle this thing down and get a good foundation and some decent beams in place and, do this.
All right, Lawrence, go ahead.
So next, caregiver and patient, no real changes there from where we are now, with the one exception that no longer is there a residency requirement to get a patient card. So people from anywhere, any state, any country can come here for cannabis treatment. The language here is a little bit different than the version that we put out a couple days ago because it separated out resident versus non-resident. I just merged that together because I don't want people on student visas to be denied access and and so on. And there were just a few gaps in the previous language. So this basically says anybody could get a patient card. If you're 18 or under, or if you're under 18, I should say, then you need 2 recommendations, just like we have now. Anyone 18 and over, just exactly the same thing as it is now. A card good for 2 years. $100 if you're on Medicare, Medicaid, Sooner Care, or a veteran. I added veterans, just $20. And those rates could even in theory be reduced over time by legislative action. So just a few sort of housekeeping things concerning the relationship to the OBN. Some language that has to do with, well, what happens when federal law changes, basically, what adjustments we're going to make. A way in which we could talk about product tracking that doesn't force you into something like metric, but creates much more flexibility, preventing anything like a monopoly and so on. Jed and I were just talking about this. This is why this is in yellow, about the language pertaining to testing. Okay, so that basically is all the administrative structure, all the business stuff, everything related to the Oklahoma Cannabis Commission. Now we get finally to patient and caregiver protections, right? So when people talk about we need to fix 788, they used to talk that way, a year and a half ago. This is what we're trying to do now to bring into the law, strengthening our protections when it comes to employment, when it comes to healthcare, and so on. So just to begin, pretty much the same possession rules as we have now. You could have up to 12 plants. I didn't divide them into 6 and 6, 6 mature, 6 immature, just 12 plants, whatever stage of growth you want, and the marijuana harvested therefrom. Your concentrates, topicals, edibles, I added in suppositories, and then commercially sold marijuana. These amounts are cumulative. Made sure that paraphernalia is legal because people are still getting charged for paraphernalia. Same rights for caregivers. If you grow or process anything beyond this, then you just need a license. You need a business license. So anything you do here is fine. If you decide to start growing 24 plants or whatever, you need a business license. And here is the decrim part. So assuming that we don't end up with full access, what this will do is it'll basically say, if you don't have a card and you have just simple possession, then you're going to face a civil fine, no misdemeanor. And if you get a card within 45 days of your citation, the $400 fine goes away. So somebody, is trying marijuana for the first time, they have a gram, they're driving home with it, they get pulled over by the police, there's no misdemeanor, it's just a $400 fine. And if they then go ahead and they get a card, they show that they got a card and they don't have to pay the $400 fine.
Yeah, and that
So,
should work
pretty
out.
strong.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. That should work out kind of like a ticket. You get a ticket for a tag or something like that. Usually you're given a certain amount of time to get it cleaned up, and then it's reduced to court costs. We're thinking something like that.
Right. Eligibility, basically the same thing that was said earlier on. Regardless of residency, you're eligible with the qualification that home grow is only allowed for residents of the state of Oklahoma. So somebody who comes in from another state to get a patient card, they're legally protected and they could purchase. But if they're not a resident of the state, they can't home grow here. And for obvious reasons, because you don't want to sort of create this sort of black market loophole.
Right.
All right.
So for any of those that would be worried that illegal aliens might get in the medical program to grow, they wouldn't be able to under this. They'd be able to get into the program.
Yep.
They could buy for themselves, but they wouldn't be able to grow.
Yep. Then what I did was for the next section, I had sort of big, broad language that's going to hopefully cover everything. And then I get into details. So no person shall be subject to arrest, prosecution, or penalty in any manner under state law or municipal or county ordinance or resolution, including without limitation, a civil penalty or disciplinary action by a business, etc., or bureau solely on the basis of conduct permitted in this article. So that's sort of meant to cover everything. Same with the next one. No person shall be denied any form of healthcare, any form of housing, any form of employment, any public assistance, public benefit, parental right, educational opportunity, extracurricular activities, or licensure solely on the basis of the conduct permitted by this article, with the one qualification, unless federal law absolutely requires it. No person shall be denied eligibility in public assistance, SNAP, children's nutritional programs, TANF, and so on and so forth. And now, no test which identifies the presence of THC metabolites in a person's blood, urine, hair follicle, or other bodily fluids or tissues shall be used as dispositive of impairment. That is, shall be used to prove impairment. Can't use it. Cannot use THC metabolites to prove impairment anymore with this. All right. They can still use active THC if they want to determine impairment, but they cannot, for any reason whatsoever, use THC metabolites as a basis for evaluating impairment. HIPAA protections, all the kinds of privacy protections out there, employment rights, and this is a big fix. No employer may refuse to hire, discipline, discharge, or otherwise penalize an applicant or employee solely on the basis of cannabis-related stuff. This isn't to exclude them from being able to have policies that say you can't be under the influence of marijuana for a safety-sensitive job. Doesn't stop them from testing people for active THC. But again, they cannot use THC metabolites as a basis for testing. No person providing professional services to a medical marijuana business shall be subject to arrest, prosecution, disciplinary actions, or penalties. So any secondary business related to the cannabis industry, they can't get into any trouble. Healthcare rights. So basically, for the purposes of medical care, your cannabis use will not be taken as an illicit substance, won't disqualify you in any way from medical care. No medical practitioner shall deny or alter your treatment based upon your use of cannabis. They can't deny or alter your treatment for scheduled medication. So this is a big deal within the pain management community. It protects everybody in pain management so the doctors can't terminate you. It says that it's within the standard of care. So doctors are given the legal umbrella. So doctors here are being protected, saying, doctor, it's now within the standard of care for you to be able to treat patients, including prescribing to them scheduled medications if they're using cannabis. And then this part here provides all the further protections to doctors. So every kind of protection a doctor might need for having anything to do with cannabis. Parental rights, nobody's going to be denied custody or visitation and so on for anything related to cannabis. Licensure rights, nobody is going to be withheld or denied from any kind of state-issued license. Again, I say within this context, they can't use THC metabolites to determine impairment. And this now connects in with driving. They can't use THC metabolites to claim that you're impaired while driving. So it's not unlawful to operate a motor vehicle with THC metabolites in one's body fluids or tissues. Further, the mere presence of THC.
Which you need to remind everybody, which it currently is.
Which it currently is. Right? It's currently illegal. Every single person who uses cannabis, it's illegal for you to drive right now. You may not have known that, but it's illegal for you to drive right now if you have a THC metabolite in your system.
Well, I think folks are aware.
Okay.
It's just crazy, isn't it?
So,
sorry.
Yeah. It makes it clear that this doesn't mean that you could drive under the influence if you're mentally, affected by the THC, but mere metabolites can't be used as a basis for charging you with being under the influence. Second Amendment rights. All of our Second Amendment rights are preserved: right to bear arms, right to possess guns, right to purchase guns, and so forth. Nothing we do but federal law, but at least at the state level, we're protected. And I wrote this: no state or local agency, municipal or county governing authority shall enforce a federal law that prohibits or restricts firearm use or ownership solely on the basis of conduct permitted on this article. So they can't enforce federal law. Somebody might, a private dealer, an FFL agent might say, I can't sell to you if you say that you're using cannabis. But no law enforcement officer is going to be able to enforce any federal laws on you for your use of cannabis. Fourth Amendment rights, Fifth Amendment rights, and this is a huge thing because of the recent appellate court decision that said that decision from about a week and a half ago that said that if you have a patient card, it offers no protection whatsoever from law enforcement searching you. So if you use cannabis and you have a patient card, that patient card protects you not at all, according to that appellate court. What this does is it addresses that. First of all, it says, if you're using cannabis, that means that you're not going to be revoked for bail, parole, or probation, which they are right now, right? So people
Yes,
under
yeah,
parole,
this is how
under probation,
they're sending people to jail every day right here. We still hear from probation officers, bail bondsmen. I heard from a bail bondsman recently, and public defenders that say that they've got clients that are going to jail every day for this particular issue. Go ahead, Lawrence. Sorry.
so that stops all that. No conduct permitted under this article shall constitute the basis for detention, search, or arrest. The only exception is if the law enforcement officer thinks that you're impaired while driving, they can investigate that issue of impairment, but they cannot search your vehicle if they see or smell cannabis otherwise.
On that note, I want
without
to
evidence.
let me throw something out there. On that note, I want to encourage everybody out there that we should be pushing a law to make it mandatory for all of our law enforcement to have body cameras and to have them on all the time. I know from being up at the Capitol, the only reason why they don't do it right now is some of the small law enforcement agencies say they can't pay for it. I say we can find the money. Go ahead, Lauren.
Maybe we use some of the money for full access for it.
Well, and there is something, this, and this point right here, this point right here is something that's going to bear, a lot of discussion, because one thing we're not going to do is we're not going to tie law enforcement's hands to a degree that would hinder some of their operations in the field that are addressing a serious immediate concern that we have here in the state. So, there are other decisions that are coming out on this particular topic, and so what I want to make sure we do is I will always err on the side of individual rights, but I want to make sure that we really, really, get in on this, and I'd like to get some more opinions on exactly, especially from law enforcement. They've been talking about, their perspectives on this. And I mean, they've got some valid concerns. So want to make sure that we're hearing from everyone, and, we get this part, make sure that we've got the right balance in there in doing what we're doing.
Law enforcement could still search you for other grounds. They could have other grounds. The totality of circumstances could be what motivates them to do the search. But the mere presence of marijuana should not be, the mere presence of marijuana should not then contribute to the determination of a search. That's what this is saying.
Right. So let's imagine that someone is, someone's, running a van full down the road. And I mean, it obviously reeks from 10 feet away, right? They've got license, they've got insurance, they've got all of that. They've obviously got a hell of a lot of weed on them. And maybe they do or don't have a license, commercial license for that. That's one thing we want to make sure for our safety is that that we've got it all lined out, to consider all circumstances here.
Right.
Yeah, I would argue that they just have a little bit of very smelly cannabis, and they've done a bad job of packing it.
Right. So let's put it this way. If the smell is so overwhelming, there's no way it could have come from a quantity of cannabis consistent with what's legal according to this article, then the law enforcement officer would still have a basis for a search. But if they see a joint or they see a little, bag of 1/8 of an ounce, that's the kind of thing that can't be the basis for a search.
Yeah, because they're going to use that to find any and everything else they can get you for, and people are going to continue to get arrested every day. This is another one that I'm looking forward to hearing everybody's.
Definitely. This will be a wonderful rabbit hole for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it should be. Go ahead, Lawrence. Let's move forward.
If for some reason you're pulled over by law enforcement, then they cannot seize what you have. Anything that you have that is lawful according to this article, they can't seize it. So they can't take away your ounce or whatever for some crazy reason. If you're legally entitled to possess that ounce, they can't seize it. And no person shall be subject to increased punishment for any crime or civil infraction on the basis of any conduct permitted under this article. So let's say you go to court for something or other, and the law enforcement officer brings up the fact that you're a medical marijuana patient. The judge cannot increase your sentence, cannot in any way use that as a factor for determining your punishment. All right, so next, home grow protections. There shall be no additional licensing or fees related to home grows. No municipal, county governing body or agency may charge any additional fees or require any additional licensing for home grows. Municipal and county governing bodies shall not restrict or interfere with the rights of patient, licensees, or caregivers to possess, purchase, cultivate, or transport marijuana within the quantities permitted under this article. And there no ordinance or regulation or statute relating to home grows shall be unduly burdensome. So, they might be able to still say you have to have a fence around your home grow, but whatever it is, it can't burden you in a way. So like, for instance, if you're going to produce at home a couple $1,000s worth of cannabis a month, a year, a couple $1,000s worth of cannabis a year, hardly could they require you to put out any dollar amount for your fencing commensurate with that the costs and the burdens to you for enacting your home grow have to be as minimal as possible. And then it's just a few sort of technicalities, judicial review, severability, and effective date. So, any more ideas? It's sort of like we're throwing the kitchen sink at this. Any ideas you have for your personal protections, send them along. Everything that we could possibly do to protect people. And so, I just try to do everything that I could, imagine every context that I could to put in a personal protection. And so when people talk about we need to fix 788, hopefully these are the kinds of fixes that people had in mind.
Well, I think that they probably are, Lawrence. On this particular section, on the patient protections and such, that's about a third of the document. A lot of folks, a lot of this language will be familiar to folks in the context of quote unquote fixing 788. Because a lot of it is actually statute right now through prior legislative action. However, there's a good seam of it that is not, and there are things, there are tweaks that have been worked through very meticulously and made here. Y'all have done a really, really good job of that real meticulous work to get through and clean it up, tweak a little bit. We've had a lot of discussions, that have been based on a lot of other discussions that we've all had. So I think that the thing here, there are several obvious good advancements in patients' rights in what we're doing. And those are some things that we really want to make sure we look at. We're pushing the envelope to a reasonable degree. There's some discussion to be had in there, but by and large, the number one thing that we're looking at here, because when we look at this constitutional amendment, we say, well, how many pages do we want to put into this? Well, at the end of the day, over the last 3 years, I think, that it's obvious, it seems obvious to me that a greater emphasis needs to be put on those patients' rights to kind of say, okay, here's a refresher. Here are avenues, dollars that could go to law enforcement, and to other points in the community to ensure that, educational training, that the word's getting out on what these are enshrined. This is getting, let's get the word out. There's mechanisms, there's funding for it. So, like other states, their patients' rights are enshrined. I think that ours should be as well. So, again, there's a lot of this is going to look familiar, but it's still a really big advancement, and some of the newer things that are already here. And then, of course, good ideas that we get over the next, couple of 3 weeks from the community as a whole. We can, build this really nice and really tight. And I think something that will get us where we need to go for the long haul.
Okay, Lawrence, I'm betting that in about 3 minutes, you can tell us what's changed in the, on the recreational petition, what the differences are.
Yeah, so basically the recreational petition, I'm
We
sorry.
don't need to we don't need to go into too much detail on that one, but I do want everybody to know it's out there and what the ideas are.
I was multitasking. I realized that I forgot something in one of them. And so I just added it back in. I forgot to add in sharing into the full access side of it. So what does the full access side do? It instead of having to get a card, you don't need to get a card. Anybody over the age of 21 could purchase. If you do want to get a card, you could still get a card, and then your tax rate is less. So what's the breaking point? If you spend $1,000 a year on cannabis, then the 7% excise tax is $70. So over 2 years, it's $140, right? So that's basically the cost of your physician recommendation and your licensing fee. So if you spend more than $1,000 a year, get a patient card. If you spend less than $1,000 a year, you probably don't want to bother getting a patient card. So that's really it. That's pretty much the only thing that it does. And like I just mentioned, it also legalizes sharing. That's about it.
Yeah, I know people are going to want to find a way to share in the medical petition, but I just don't see how that's possible. As long as we call it medicine sharing, I don't see a way. But who knows? Maybe someone's got an idea we haven't thought of yet. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Right. Plus expungement. Right. The other thing that I added in, to the full access was language that basically says this: if you've ever been charged with any kind of criminal act related to cannabis, if that criminal act is now legal according to this article, then your charges are going to be vacated and your charges are going to be expunged. All right. So your criminal record is basically gone as if it never happened.
And we peeled off just a little bit of money for that, right?
And what I did was, out of the money that's generated out of the full access program, it's going to pay for that. So rather than you personally having to spend $800, $1,200, $1,400 or whatever for lawyers, the monies that are generated out of the full access program will be used to fund a grant program, a means tested grant program to pay for your legal fees. So if you're a millionaire, we have a means testing threshold. I don't specify it, but if you make $500,000, you could pay for it on your own. If you're making $50,000 a year or $80,000 a year or whatever it is, then the money that's brought in by the state from this program will pay for the costs related to your expungement.
Jed, what do you think?
I think there's a lot to unpack. I think that there's gonna. I know that as we get situated with Facebook over at Orca, they're haters out the gate. So we're getting that stuff resolved with them, and as we do, we're gonna look to really start picking this thing apart. Probably in 10 or 15 minute segments. Be happy to hop on with y'all anytime you want to talk about specific chunks of it. If we really want to deep dive, we'll see. Well, I can't wait to hear what folks want to talk about more. I just assume we toss something out there that ain't too bad, and let's see what folks in the community really key on, and we'll just keep talking about what folks want to talk about, and those real points. Hopefully we get them, get consensus and see about moving forward with it.
Yeah, I'd like to say I'm glad we're at this point. I'm looking forward to moving forward. I'm hoping we land in the right place.
Yeah, the first thing is this: we come together on language. If we can do that, obviously there's a whole lot of dollars and a whole lot of volunteerism that's going to be have to put into something. So I just want to take this one step at a time, and we've got I've seen a lot of folks come together and help generate what we've got. So now phase 2, let's get it out there for everyone. And, anyone that wants to contribute, let's get it in there. Let's take a look at what's going on, see what we can come up with. And we'll just, work, we're just going to keep the work people updated on the process as we go, see what happens, you know?
I think the number this time is what, 176,000? Is that still what it is?
Yeah, it's a $178, and we need to pick up about 250,000 signatures,
Right.
you know, and we need to do it on two. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't need to go down and walk down and file anything until we've got 100K in the bank account, plain and simple. From there, we're looking at about 650K to get both of them on the ballot. So, you know, we'll have discussions about, what locations look like. The big obvious for everyone, and I want to address this is, oh, well, we've got X amount of dispensaries. You know, the dispensaries will do this. You know, hold on just a minute. First of all, this is a process that we have to maintain quality controls on. So we're going to be doing, we're going to do training. We're not assuming anyone's support here. Okay. And we know that there will folks will want to be involved. And we look forward to working with everyone on that. But, at the end of the day, what dispensaries potentially give us is are basically field offices, a convenient setup point. But at some point in time, when you're gathering the signatures, busy dispensary doesn't have time to have someone manning that table to make sure that folks understand what they're signing, that they're getting it signed in correctly. You only gain so much per se by, having the dispensaries. It'll be a great draw. It's a great rallying point for everyone. But we want to, and as we go forward here in a couple of weeks, we get close to consensus on language, I'll get it really laid out to folks what this organization, looks like. I mean, again, I've been doing this type of stuff for 15 years here in the state. That's what a lot of my peers, are doing. We've got this community, if it comes together with our industry and our ability to organize, is a force. And as long as we handle things in a responsible manner and we make sure that we work for the betterment of Oklahoma, we can do what we need to do. First things first, though, before I go down all those rabbit holes, is just let's get this language together, and that'll tell us a lot about if we're going to be able to come together as a community and do what we need to do.
Okay, well, I think, Lawrence, what maybe we should plan on doing is maybe coming back on a regular basis again, once a week or something, and just taking a look at where it's at, if there's any changes during that week, and getting more ideas out there and discussing with everybody what's left to be done. What do you think?
Yeah, and there's just sort of a little thing I'd like to add, just a kind of reminder to everybody. How many of you watching remember this? The Cannabis Constitution of the state of Oklahoma?
Yes, I
You guys
remember it
remember
well.
this?
It hangs over my fireplace.
Okay,
So,
Lawrence,
yeah.
this
Yeah.
document has to be updated. Okay.
Yes, I realize that.
You're not,
Yeah, we know.
no. You're not going far enough at this point in time. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
It is the Cannabis Constitution of the Provisional State of Cannabis.
Ah, I see. I see. Okay, well, we'll work on that one. We figured it was time for some amendments. So,
Right.
all
So
right.
after 7088 passed, as we were working with the legislature, and we were basically coming out with a statement of principles that reflected our values as an advocate, I was asked to create the Cannabis Constitution of the state of Oklahoma. And the particular articles in this constitution kind of came up from the themes at the time. And it obviously was something that people really loved. And we have a chance basically to make it real, right? We have a chance to take this sort of, just image or abstract idea of our constitutional rights as cannabis consumers and truly create a constitutional protection for them. For 100 years, cannabis users have been an oppressed population For 100 years, the government has destroyed people's lives for using cannabis, put them in jail, undermined their opportunity to get jobs, ruined families, right? 100 years of oppression is enough, right? That's why we have constitutions, to protect people from the government, right? From the government intruding into our lives. And if there's any need out there in our world for protections from the government, it's those needs that have to do with preserving our privacy, preserving our rights, preserving our individual liberty. And that has a lot to do with what we do to our own bodies, including the consumption of cannabis. So the abstract idea from 3 years ago of a cannabis constitution is now potentially going to be something that will be real. And I think it ought to be real. I think it deserves to be in the Constitution because we have suffered for the better part of 100 years unreasonable and unfair oppression at the hands, right, of the prohibitionist ideology. We need to protect our rights.
And
Who
I would
else
like
will?
I would like to add that I really want everybody to take a hard look at those patient protections and how it plays out also in the full access petition. I really think that we can do this so much better than any other state has. I mean, I really do. As with our medical program being completely unique, I really think we have a chance to get it right. And your ideas of mixing, putting cannabis or medical marijuana or marijuana and hemp under the same umbrella, that is that's a step in that right direction. That's doing something different than any other state is doing, and possibly helping set us up for, again, being the leaders as we are in the medical program, but not for medical reasons, but more for how accessible the program is. So now let's make it for more medical reasons and other reasons.
Yeah, we just got a little bit of cleanup we need to do, and we've already got the best program in the country. That's just, I mean, across the board. That's just what it is. But the reality is we're running a little hot right now, guys, and so we need to, lay some things into place, get everything settled down, and everyone will benefit. And vote for this bill, and it'll make your wildest dreams come true.
All right, guys. Well, we are going to wrap it up, but like Lawrence and I were saying, I think we'll come back on a regular basis. Jed, maybe we can get you on here with us and talk about this at least once a week while we try and get everybody to get grumpy. Remember that government refusal united many people to say yes. The government didn't write 788. The government didn't vote for 788. They didn't want 788. They still don't want 788. They're not going to fix this. We are when we get grumpy. So let's do it, folks. All right, folks, that's it. Until next time, stay grumpy. I'll see you on the road.